Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Contenders Trials North America. I am Dora. I'm joined by Moxi. My God, it's a beautiful day to support Tier 2, isn't it, Mox?
You say day, I say night. I'm trying not to look outside. Who needs bedtimes when you can watch some glorious Overwatch in action?
It's all right. I already ended up doing your time of things earlier on in today with EU, so we just move over to NA. It's only fair, right?
This is all about balancing things out, but it's going to be interesting to see how the two teams today battle things out, Revival versus Saints, and these guys did participate in Season 1 of Contenders way back before Genji had risen back up to prominence, and so it is going to be a close one, Saints picking up that 5th spot, and Revival sitting on the 8th rung. Gonna be interesting to see whether or not they can claw that space back now that there'll be a different meta, new compositions, and a whole amount of new ultimates to watch out for.
Yeah, with Genji effectively returned from the grave, all of a sudden the game has changed entirely because you introduced this effectively mobile brawler. He's not nearly as based on his blade as he once was. Now people are finding new combos. You and I talked about this earlier, about how it's sort of this Overwatch renaissance. Everyone's using all the things that they've learned over the course of Overwatch. Whether it's all of the stuff we learned from Dive, whether it's all of the Halt combos we learned from when Halt Hook was a big deal, whether it's all the sustain that we learned from Double Shield, whether it's the team coordination that we learned from Goats, it's all kind of culminated in this. Now we're seeing halts into Swift Strikes, we're seeing halts into accretions, we're seeing very, very aggressive fights, but ones that are effectively just extremely long battles of attrition that take teams playing extremely good Overwatch to pull off. And I think this is kind of just a culmination of everything we've seen, and it's really exciting to see from all these top teams.
Yeah, and it's really all about who has those abilities to burn at the end of it. Because the Batiste who has that immortality field a little bit longer than the other Batiste, you're going to see that same sort of balance as, well, we had Dive, and there's Nyata who was able to stay up alive longer than the enemies then. And it's all going to be kicking off here on Ilios first. It's going to be, well, it's going to be the environmental comps coming out. And we may get to see something that's just a slight deviation away from that meta of double shielding. But no, these guys, they're going to go with the defaults. Remember, Saints aren't actually running Yeetle in their composition at the moment, so you're not going to be seeing that Orisa Ball matched up anytime soon.
Absolutely not. And with Saints coming in without Yeetle, it's actually kind of raising the question of, is this a composition they're going to run with for most of the day? Oftentimes earlier, we would see exactly that, where one team would just find a composition they like and stay on it the entire time and never change, which honestly isn't too surprising given the power of this double shield composition.
Well, both of these guys are going to be going for that mirror matchup. Keep an eye on the Batiste right now, because it's going to be the difference between those guys. Whoever's able to keep that immortality field online, immediately going to give themselves a massive leg up.
Yeah, and this is where we've seen this fight take place a lot. It turns into an all-out brawl, though, and a lot of times it's the Orisas going down first. You're at that front line, you're taking so much damage, and you see Nitch drop so low. It's not going to be enough, but it is going to give Saints a lot of room to start working with, as well as control over this health pack. Both teams want to reset their abilities, they'll get their health bars back in full. They can start working on those shields again, but the first Amp Matrix is going to be out for Revival, and it's already paying off. Both Orisas fall, and this fight gets a little bit dicey, but at the end of the day, it's going to be Saints taking it away with a nice set of kills from NSD.
Yeah, so it may be Aspen's amplification matrix that comes out first, but the team is supposed to abandon ship and run straight for Saints' amplification matrix. And so Majero's is the one that finds value. And Majero and Saints are the ones who are going to be finding value in this next fight, though, because they're the ones with the ultimates. They're the ones controlling how what comes in with this play, because Revival is that win condition. They know that they can get more kills with it, but it's going to be so hard, not just to get through the entirety of the team, but to survive Gauss Sigma.
Yeah, and absolutely, you do want to keep your eye on Wub, though. He can be very streaky, but when he's at his top, avoiding these ultimates, something he can do. But Aspire starting out with the Deadeye is already going to find one Grid Flux to try and peel here from Gao, but it doesn't find all that much value. The kill is still blue in the feed, and it's turning the way of Saints.
And if you're Saints, you are extremely unhappy right now, because you used so many ultimates there, duh. So many! And it was all to try and keep Revival off your back, and none of it is going to be there to try and stop Web's blade. Instead, you've got to initiate with the blade of your own. Shiz is going to have that supercharger, and this is just a little bit away from their ultimate. This is the difference maker. The Genji blade can be big, and it's gotta be.
It needs to be perfect from them. Both of these blades can be volatile, though. Both of these players just as much so, but the fight's taking place in the same spot. A lot of room to go for the blades. It's completely boosted up. Tons of damage from Hazard by himself. A nice 1-2 dinner right in the nick of time as well. Saints are going to hold on, and 70% ticks over.
And they have the tool as well to keep this point in that possession even longer. Madera is going to have an amplification matrix, and look at how active this team are being already. They want to drop amplification matrix on that main road to make sure Wub can't go for that blade, because that's the turnaround that Revival desperately needs.
Oh, but what a pick! Shiz goes down, you're down 1 shield. That's such a massive disadvantage. Revival now, their only objective is to take this with using as few resources as possible so they can continue this ultimate roll.
Yeah, if you're Saints, you come into this, you let that point get flipped. You know that you only need one good fight left until you walk away with this first point. If you're Revival, you've got to be winning these fights, but you've got to be winning them on budget. You can't afford to give that Superchargers Genji Blade combination, because you're going to need Superchargers for this next fight. It's got to be a Dry Blade, and it's got to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, Wub needs to come in and get value so they can start rolling that ultimate economy. Like you're saying, it's not just this fight, it's about all the fights after it. Plenty of time to set up for Saints. They're taking it nice and even. They're going to start off with an amplification matrix as well as both their shields set up. Revival can easily avoid this, though. It isn't much of a problem now, but the Grid Clutch is going to be a little bit of a thorn in their backside. A lot of damage being thrown their way, but it's Wub coming in with that blade. They do use the bongo with it, though, as Revival managed to hold on to the point, but at what cost?
So many ultimates. You're going to have a Sigma Flux, and that's all you're going to have. And honestly, you're going to have to hold on to it, because Saints are going to be coming in with this blade, with the superchargers on the side of Shiz. And honestly, you've got nothing outside the immortality field to be able to put in that Genji's Wave beside that Sigma Flux. You have to put Sigma Flux into dealing with Hazard and hope that you don't pick up Edison at the same time, otherwise that McCree can Deadeye from so high up.
Edison can be a real problem with the Deadeye, like we've seen. There's more ultimates on the back line right now for Saints. All they need to do is just survive this initial push. Wub can make a difference by assassinating one of these supports, but with the rally being online, it gets all that much harder as Revival are just being pushed straight back into their spawn, completely bullied away, and as their main tank goes down, 95% takes over for the Saints, and they're looking to take map 1 of Helios.
Yeah, Revival not going to be able really to pull into this contest either. Niches onto the Hammond, Salty, the Diva, Aspen, the Lucio, all to try and get that touch through, but they were so far away from ultimates. Even if they could keep that stagger going, though, it would be such a hard task for that team, and it all comes down to the fact that they used the supercharger along with the blade. They needed to be on budgets, on very tight economies in all of those fights, because it wasn't about the one that the blade was committed to. It was about all that came after it. And they were never able to claw their economy back into the off the gutter from when we saw those ultimates being put in.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of that double shield game of chicken, right? You want to win the fight of attrition, but if you get a little bit too nervous, you end up overcommitting like that. And so Rival didn't really have the guts, but as we head into a different map, I think things change significantly, especially when it comes to team comps, because we're already seeing Aspire change it up with the Ashe.
Yeah, this is something that can be a real problem, because Edison is going to be so focused, right, on dealing with Wub on this Genji, and so you're going to have to rely on Hazard to keep Aspire's attention away, because if not, your front line is going to be so fragile with those dynamites, with all of that spam damage coming on through.
Yeah, similar setups are going to come out to last map. Effectively the same architecture, actually. This time, though, Saints have high ground to work with, and they've already picked up Aspire. All of that damage that you mentioned was going to be coming through no longer. The Genji to fall after, and this is looking like a very clean fight win for Saints to start things off right.
Revival's composition sets up in such a weird place, because when you've got that Ashe, you want the high ground, you want the control, you want the line of sight so you can just spam in, but it's Saints to take up the high ground, and Aspire is left looking up at Edison, who's already 10% ahead in that ultimate battle. And we know that Deadeye is such a powerful tool, especially when utilized through an amplification matrix or through a halt coming out from Shiz. It's something that you do have to be worried about if you're a Revival and you don't want online.
Well, I got good news and bad news, Mox. Good news is that they were trying to listen to you, but with Aspire already dead, that high ground no longer matters. They got halted off and taken down. Hazard dies, but he's already done his work. He's completely cut down the damage of Revival, who now can take this battle of attrition with not much else. They do have an amplification matrix, which turns their damage into a real threat, and they'll manage to take down HCP with it alongside the shields of Saints, but the Saints still have both their shields up. They have their tanks. This is dual, but it's extremely hard. Aspen's gunning people down and making up for that lost Ashe.
And Revival, because they're making up for that lost Ashe, They put in the Sigma Flux. So many ultimates committed. And yes, they've got that point flip, but how long is it going to be? Because now you have to initiate with this, right? Wubby's got this blade, and you have to start it off before Hazard starts one of his own, because you're going to have rallies available for both of these Brigittas. Supercharges are going to be coming up for Shiz so quickly. You cannot allow the Genji blade to come through until Shiz has gone down.
Absolutely. The Bongo's going to be a real difficult problem to deal with. However, Revival are the ones who have to do it. They put themselves in this situation, and it's what's starting it out with the Blade Bongo combination. This time, though, they hold off that trigger finger just a little bit, Mox, is what you were looking for.
Yeah, they kept a hold of that rally. They're going to have this Bob going into this next fight, and they're going to need it. Because Saints kept a hold of all of their ultimate stuff. They were even more restrained than the other side, and they're coming in with an absolute arsenal under their belt. And if you're Revival, you've got to buy time for Sorted to get into the Sigma Flux and ask them to get into this amplification matrix, because you need all of the space you can manage right now.
Let's see if this arsenal is threatening or just a weapons-grade pile of garbage. It's already looking good for him, though, as the Genji ult's going to be enough. The Dragon Blade close things out, but they pressed a lot of Q there.
And if you're Revival, you kept a hold of a fatty of your own too. The rally, the buff, the amplification matrix, they pretty much took that Genji blade combination on the chin, so now they'll come back in with the ultimate economy on their side.
Now, let's see if they can use it properly, because we've seen these teams come out before, right, with an ultimate disadvantage, still managing to sneak away fights, and a lot of that's been down to losing your Orisa early, so definitely look for one of these teams to fall first. Oh my god, Aspire! The Dynamite over the top catches absolutely everybody, and he's looking for more, even 4 to his name, and he's not done yet, a 5th from the Bob. Aspire coming up massive when Revival needed.
But Saints can come up massive in this next fight, because Gao's got that Sigma Flux and Edisy. He's going to have that Deadeye, so if it's Revival, it all comes down to keeping Aspen safe, but crucially, keeping Immortality Field available for when that Sigma Flux comes through, because you are going to have to protect yourself. Not just from that ultimate, but from Edisy's Revolver as well.
There's a lot of very scary propositions. The Gravitic Fluxo will be used alongside the Deadeye. E-Deity, though, goes down extremely fast. Immediately from the Dynamite of Aspire, which matters so much because now you don't have to worry about a lot of the damage. Same way as losing the Ashe earlier hurt Aspire so much. Saints are now playing effectively on just pure respawns. E-Dicey, though, is trying to come in on the Doomfist, get a little bit of stagger. 99% on the point, though. This one's looking not good for Saints.
Well, Revival lose their Genji, but they've still got the entirety of the rest of their team. Saints had to put so much into dealing with what before that blade comes through that unfortunately it gives the space for the rest of the team to come up in that kill feed and take us to the third and final map of Ilias. And oh boy, I am excited to see how these guys play Ruins, because you can either lean really heavily into the compositions that you've been running, or you can throw a spanner in the works and come out with something like a Widowmaker who can go for that key pick, the one headshot onto the Batiste. Even if you're trying to shoot into double shielding, sometimes all it takes is that one moment of brilliance, one shot to get the Batiste out of the way to open up the path for the rest of your team to just roll them.
I think brilliance is exactly what they need, Moxi. This map can be so polarizing. The team that's going to take this point first, especially with double shield, is going to make the other's life a living hell. Aspire, though, opting for that Widowmaker off of the Ashe. We saw him pop off on one. Can we see them pop off on the Widowmaker is going to be the big question, because if you're not getting value on this, that is free time for the opposing McCree to get damage in, and your team will lose unless you can get some serious value. Over top, trying to peek through and get a shot in. The supports are open, but the heads are not right now, and with that, the Saints are going to fall to the pressure of the McCree.
Yeah, the Widow just not able to find anything other than double shielding, because the team wasn't really able to push Saints into that panic, right? Where you set up that crossfire. You can't go into the front line because the tanks are there. You can't go to the side because the Spire's just waiting to line up that crosshair with your head. You're sticking with the Widow, and it is a risky play. You're 58% to that ultimate. Edisy is already at 85% of the Deadeye and pretty much uncontested unless the Spire is able to one-shot them.
Aspire's going to have an extremely hard time actually killing anything right now. This map, while good for Widowmaker, is so hard to actually retake on with Widowmaker. The sidelines aren't great from an attacking perspective. However, taking them anyways. Wub looking to get in the back line and create a good bit of damage. Has the Dragon Blade, and it's a fight that they can crack open with that ability.
You can see that he really wants to go for it. He's just waiting for the go time, which will be Madera putting down an immortality field. But while you wait, your team are falling around you.
Oh, Wub's finding a nice set of 2, and just when they need it, the third one comes through as well. Revival, they were looking extremely rough there, but managed to pull it back at the last second.
And this is the setup that Spire's been waiting for on this Widow. You're going to have Infrasight. You can crack that open as soon as you know that Saints are going to be trying to go for this approach, and try to spot out where Madera goes. Because if that Baptiste falls early, the entirety of Saints' composition is forced to stagger out and give up more tick percentage to Revival, who'll be building up towards those ultimates.
I'm very curious about this positioning of Revival. Why are they staying so far back when their Widowmaker, all she needs is space? Oh, you can tell I got a little nervous there, thought he was going off the edge. But with that, the Saints are going to happily take the space that Revival have allowed them to get. The Widowmaker will have sidelines once they make it on the point. But Saints are the ones in control. Revival need to maintain aggression onto it. Immortality field has already been forced out. The health bars are so low. Wub falls, and with that, you lose all that clutch ability. Arista's just getting mauled on by E-Dicey, and this is just looking extremely rough for Revival, who've managed to not really find much of a way into this game.
Revival sticking so close to Aspire shows that they are terrified that Hazard is going to just maul their Widow if they leave him alone. And it's going to force Aspire off the Widowmaker and onto the Ash, but you've got so much damage to make up for. You do have ultimates that you can use to surge ahead, Supercharges, Amplification Matrix. Those are something that Saints will be scared of and will try and disengage away from, especially because they don't have anything other than a Devil to answer back.
Oh, you can't disengage away from 2 kills, though. A third comes through from Aspire, and immediately that Ash pick is paying off. There's a reason why we were calling for it earlier. The Widow is just not getting nearly as much value as far as damage goes.
Yeah, unless you can get that one-shot onto the support, sometimes running Widowmaker into that double shielding tends to not often be worth it. There's much more of a value with Ash all around the board, rather than just that one very niche situation, which only comes around once in a blue moon. But if you're Revival, you're going to be looking to hold on to this point because it's 97% for Saints. Remember, they need this one last fight until they take Ilios. So Revival have to immediately shut down these fights as quickly as possible. They've got the Supercharges, they've got the Blade, and Hazard will have a Blade of his own, but it will be completely dry and on its own.
Wub should be expected to get the Blade in here, but he immediately gets stunned up. The Immortality field from the opposing team keeping him alive, but oh my god, can this guy do any wrong with a sword in his hand? Absolutely not. Proves yet again that he is the top dog in server right now.
And Revival doing such a good job of keeping a hold of the Sigma Flux and the Rally, so you've got aggression, you've got something that can pick you up the kills, and not only that, forces Saints to play around it. You don't want to group up together, you've got to split your forces so that no one, the entire team, doesn't get caught out by that Sigma Flux, and that can pave the way for Liar's Rally to come in and give Revival so much aggression that they can collapse them onto the team.
And that aggression is going to be followed up with some dynamite. A lot of burn damage being thrown their way. It's also using this Cryptic Flux extremely early is curious, because Saints can just back away and ignore a lot of that damage. They're going to have to use the rally to try and sustain the fight out, get aggressive, but now Hazard sees the open backline, immediately jumps onto Aspire, who's going to bob to try and buy a little bit of space. This Blade is not getting all that value, Moxi.
Yeah, Aspire was able to coach gun the Genji away, so Hazard, when he goes for that pick onto Aspire, doesn't manage to get it, and sets the stage for Aspire to send Bob through. But Saints aren't quite out of the water just yet. Hazard's still around. Arista falls for the side of Revival, and they can't touch! Because remember, it was the one fight. Saints just needed one good win, and as soon as it went their favor, so too did the rest of Ilios.
And Revival, I've got to say, Wub has impressed me. We mentioned him earlier as a very streaky player. None of those blades missed. That was some really, really strong Genji play. And when you can rely on the blades, that means not only are you going to get more value out of them kill-wise, but you're drawing out a lot more cooldowns, even if you're not getting killed. The Saints need to learn to respect it a little bit more, because Revival, their ultimate economy is fantastic. Their ultimate usage has been good. And from what we've seen of Contenders trials so far, that's what's really mattered the most.
The one time where we saw Revival make a slight slip up when it came to ultimate economy immediately haunted them. Salty threw in that Sigma Flux just a tiny bit early. And as soon as that Sigma Flux comes on through, we see the Genji. We see the Genji just look and eye Aspire up, and that Ashe suddenly looks a lot less like a player and much more like a tasty slap of sashimi. Because out comes the Blade, and away goes Aspire, but oh, so close to being able to come in clutch with that bob, but unfortunately Revival just did not have the forces left to rally around once the Blade had finished.
Yeah, I mean, while they may be seeming a little bit more like a sushi chef. One thing I want to talk about is the fact that Hazard looked more like a middle school lunch lady wielding a dull knife with most of their blades. And this is a player that we've seen time and time again pop off and pull off some ridiculous plays on Widowmaker, on the Genji, on the McCree, but has been incredibly quiet. And in a meta that's so defined by getting picks, by crumbling the opposing team one player at a time, you really need your DPS to be able to step up. And I'm just not getting that from the Saints right now.
I mean, a lot of it is how Revival actually played around their DPS. They didn't send them out alone into the dangerous forest to get eaten by the big bad Genji. They kept that Ashe, they kept that Widow very close to their chest, so when the Genji does go for a Spire, whether it's on the Widow, whether it's on the Ashe, he first has to get through the entirety of a team. Honestly, the way that they positioned that Ashe and that Widow felt like it was much more like an Ana being protected. The group just completely closed ranks around that DPS, and if Aspire had been able to connect those shots through those double shielding onto the Batiste, it would have been a completely different map.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's going to be them taking it away. Now we head to Blizzard World, which is actually a completely different map, and a map that we've seen play out relatively similar to others, though. Some teams have tried to run a little bit of dive on the attack both today and yesterday, but it's been primarily the double shield show. What do you think changes about how you play the double shield here, though, versus a map like Ilios?
So you have to be mobile with this double shield. That's the big difference. When it comes to Ilios and you win that first fight, you get to plunk down your two shields. You get to bunker up behind a corner, declare it as your space, and just poke damage whenever the enemy shows their faces. On Blizzard World, whether you're attacking, whether you're defending, you have to be constantly moving. You look at how defenders have to rotate. As soon as they're on that high ground on point A and that point gets pressured, everyone on the group has to be on the exact same page. The Orisa, the Sigma, both working in tandem to keep those supports safe, to keep the DPS able to consistently spam out damage just enough to cover their backs to go from A to B. And it's such a dangerous way to play, and it's one that the attackers can really punish if they have something mobile that can just zip on through like a Tracer.
Yeah, and one thing that you and I talked about previously is how long some of these fights with double shield can take. On escort maps, on hybrid maps, that can be so detrimental. It takes forever to actually grind your way through trench warfare all the way up to this point. You got to get around the first corner, and then you've got to get around the wall that's in front of the point, and then you have to make your way and stop the respawns from coming in, and then you get to B. You got to be escorting the cart this entire time, but you're also trying to fight for the high ground. And I think between today and yesterday, you and I have seen at least 4 or 5 different pushes end halfway through B. With this double shield meta, time becomes such a factor for these teams, and they're often getting ground to a halt before they can even make it that far in a map.
I mean, it's often because there's just so much control on the side of double shielding. You look at how Orisa plays when you compare her to Dive. Dive comes through, and it takes a very long time for 6 players to be comfortable to actually ignite that dive onto the high ground, and an Orisa can just halt you away immediately. If you're not running a D.Va, if you don't have that defense matrix, all of that hard work to get a Winston onto that ledge is just completely gone. And all of that time, all of that 20 seconds where you spent posturing and getting your supports into a position where they've got line of sight onto the front line, even when the dive comes through, so that you can still have that sustainability going on. When you've got your DPS setting up on different angles so they can set a crossfire up and try and separate out members of the defenders, all of that completely wasted. And on Blizzard World, it is so hard to set up once you lose that first fight, because it's so hard to get back onto the high ground without punishment.
Absolutely. And the second you give away that first fight, you're giving away an ultimate advantage, and then things just get worse from there. And then you're taking high ground at an ultimate disadvantage, and then your Genji blades after a fight when he really shouldn't have. And then you're looking at an even worse situation. And I joke about the Genji blade, but it's something we've seen multiple times this week. A lot of these Genjis, I mean, call it just Genji syndrome, but they really like trying to go for that 1v6 after their team is dead. And it's been the curse of many a team.
I mean, everyone's done it. You know, Reinhardt's, when everyone died around them, would still try and press Q to get some value with the Shadow. But the difference is, Shadows are quick to build up. Fire strikes come through, the hammer swings away, you've got an ultimate. Genji blades, unless you have a team that really supports the Genji, and I mean 24/7 supports that Genji, sends them in with a mercy pocket, has a Zarya bubble for him in every single of those occasions where he might get slapped or hacked or splattered against the wall. Like, it's so hard to consistently build up to these blades every single fight, which means if you throw away a blade, you are throwing away not just a very powerful ultimate, but a very powerful decoy, because both you and I have sort of been debating how Genji changes have been affecting all of these teams and compositions and attack styles. And one thing that we've both sort of agreed upon is that Genji Blade, what it does immediately is draw out everything from the other side. We're seeing Sigma Fluxes, we're seeing Supercharges, we're seeing Amplification Matrices, Rallies, all of these things put into a Genji's path so that the Blade might be shut down. And if you're another team, if you're the team with the Genji on your side, that's something that you can log away in the back of your mind. You send the Genji in as a scapegoat, Blade comes out, all of the other stuff from the other team comes out alongside it, and then you go into the next fight knowing full well that you've got the ultimates that you can use to just press Q and immediately win.
Yeah, I mean, I think to kind of further on what you and I were talking about earlier, it's not necessarily, okay, like every team is committing too much. Some teams aren't committing enough. The Saints repeatedly were getting beat down by Wub and his Blades, but they may need to commit more. So it's effectively this game of chicken of, we want to commit as much as we need to beat out this Blade. Even if it's bongoed up, you should be able to reliably do it with enough abilities. But if you overcommit too much, then you're just going to get rolled up afterwards, which is not the place you want to be. I think both of these teams are on very opposite sides of that coin, though. Whereas Saints weren't committing nearly enough, I think Revival could really choose to commit a little bit less in their holds.
And I mean, that's what we're seeing, the sort of logic to it. Because it used to be when Genjis were played, you had to have an Ana so that Nano would come through because the Dry Blade would pick up pretty much nothing. And you would be able to have the argument of one ultimate for the value of 2 from the other side is always going to be worth it. But now it's a Dry Blade. And now it's one ultimate versus a whole host that gets drawn out from your bank. And sometimes teams would just prefer to die to the Blade. Sometimes you've just got to lose the battle to win the war. And I think once you start understanding the moments where it's okay to do that, teams' ultimate economy will immediately bounce back. But because we're still relatively soon into this meta, we're seeing a lot of teams be very shifty, be very sort of inconsistent on whether or not they're going to commit everything or whether or not they're just going to hold everything back and decide, you know what, no, we're not going to give you any pocket money today. We'll keep a hold of all 6 of our ultimates for the next fight.
Yeah, and considering how back and forth that last matchup was, I think there's that one thing that we can kind of draw from that, like you were just talking about, is that one of these teams in this lobby feels like they're doing it better, and that's been Revival. Their ultimate economy seems to have been pretty good. They, outside of wasting their ultimates in, I think, 2 fights on Well, they got a lot better on it following that up, especially on Ruins. And I think that's going to be the major difference maker going further on into the series.
Yeah, and don't forget, Aspen on the side of Revival was actually the one who came in to that amplification matrix first on the first fight on Well. She was able to put out so much healing and sustainability, but Saints just had such a good reaction to it. They routed the entire team away from it so that the ultimate fell completely by the wayside and still had an ultimate of their own, the amplification matrix, to drill damage down. And that was why Revival lost that first fight, because Saints have been so good at reacting to how Revival initiates. And so Revival, while they are very good at initiating, might need to think a little bit more on the reactive side, whereas Saints themselves might want to swap sides. It's all about finding that sweet middle spot where you're very good at igniting fights when you feel like you're comfortable enough to, but also being able to hold the ultimates back so that you've got something to react with when someone comes towards your face with a potential team wipe.
Yeah, now we know how we kind of want these teams to play on like a more meta scale. But when it comes to individual players, was there anyone good or bad that caught your eye?
So I think a huge part of it has to be Aspire. Taking away the fact on the Ruins that the Widowmaker was not able to find the shots. When the swap came through onto Ashe, we saw the damage was immediately stepped up. And not only that, but Aspire's done such a good job, and a lot of it, yes, is the team making sure that they're constantly alive. But such a good job themselves of positioning themselves out of danger where they still get to spam damage in. And on Blizzard World, that is going to be absolutely crucial. Your damage dealers have to be surviving, have to constantly be outputting damage, constantly pressuring the front line to stay away from you. Otherwise, all of the space that separates an attacking team from a defender's team is going to be cleared within an instant, and you won't have a backline to fall back onto.
Yeah, not to mention, I think what we can kind of come together on is just the fact that every single hero in these compositions is extremely important. If one of them falls, the entire team is going to crumble. You have all 6 up, you're looking at an impregnable fortress, but the second that Genji falls, you lose pressure on the Ashe. The second the Orisa falls, you obviously lose the shield. You lose the Baptiste, means you lose the main healer. However, Saints have locked up double main, which I'm actually curious to see whether they stick on.
I mean, they are on the attacking side, so they could be swapping, and I think you have to take the swap, right? HTP, if you go for this Ana, you are going to be so vulnerable to Wob unless you can land every single sleep dot absolutely perfectly. Because you don't have that peel for the backline now, it's all going to be down to Madara with that immortality field, and suddenly you're going to be pressured not just to use it for yourself, but to use it for that Ana.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that this Ana can be pressured, but if she's not, you're getting so much value. Not to mention the fact that charging up the Nano is almost going to guarantee you a first point with Nano Blade, and Saints have already gained enough space, even without the Ana being over, having to get value. Niche is taken down extremely low here, but it's just not going to end in all that much for the Saints, as finally they can take pressure onto the point because Revival have given them a ton of space to work with. Oh my god, that is a ton of damage being thrown in at once from Hazard. Swift Strike through, catches one, looking for more, and Daisuke is there to clean on him.
Oh, and you have to feel for Revival, because they took so much damage in that fight, right? Aspen has already built up that amplification matrix, but the team scattered because they got pressed in on by all sides by Saints, who just covered that point and meant that the Baptiste just was not able to put that ultimate down, and Revival weren't able to rally around the window and use it as an opportunity to eject Saints. And now Saints are setting up on the high ground. Madara's got this amplification matrix, and Revival, they're going to have to contest this, but they're going to have to do it through that window that they themselves can't really put in now, otherwise Saints just going to disengage.
That's going to be extremely difficult. There's a window, like you mentioned. Our Saints are going to throw in one of their own and disengage. So it's actually a good bit of value found there. Not to mention the whip shot from Lyre immediately catching Madara, which is going to force Saints probably back through this choke point if Revival can find enough pressure.
Nick had such a beautiful halt as soon as that window goes up, and all of Revival spam damage into it, and it's come up huge, because not only have you managed to take the high ground, you managed to get Shiz out of the way, and that should be forcing Saints back.
Saints are really committing to this push. Hazard has finally made it worth it with the Nano Blade, but they threw a Gravitic Flux and a Nano and a Blade into breaking that after they had already pretty much lost a fight.
And now they don't have anything to couple up, which is the supercharges. So you can drop those supercharges, you will be able to buy yourself just a little bit of space, but you've still got to deal with the problem that is going to be Revival's Genji Blade. Web is going to be absolutely unstoppable.
Yeah, but Aspen's gone down again. There's no main heals for this team right now. Revival should be able to contest this. They're coming in with 6, effectively 7 players now with the Bob. And Saints, they need to respect that. Now without Whoop though, there's nothing really pressuring them as far as time other than their own HP bars. Salty's taken extremely low and finally down here. And it seems like the Saints, with that nice little reset into the room, have bought themselves enough space to take over this point.
Yeah, Revival a little bit in shreds right now. As, oh, they're even gonna try.
Come on, Daisuke, you can do it. Oh my god, he can't do it.
Pull it back. Just slowly but surely, they were able to get a couple of kills, and that at least, while they don't manage to keep Saints off that point B, they are still able to charge up a couple more ultimates. So they'll have in this next fight that supercharges, that blade, and if they go in fast enough, they can stop Saints from coming into that Genji blade of their own.
Oh, they don't have much time to get away from this, so the amplification matrix is going to mean a ton of damage coming from Revival and allow them to move forward one corner, which is actually relatively valuable for them. It's just a matter of waiting for their shield cooldowns to come back up, but the cart's already made its way here, which kind of puts them on a timer, right? That cart's going to approach the corner, and Saints are just going to continue forward with these ultimates. Start with the Gravitic Flux. Nice shot by Gao to take down this Fire Amplification Matrix as well, and Saints are committing everything to this push. But one looking to shut him down with a blade of his own, finds a third! Again, this guy just does not miss!
And he's going to have to not miss now because he's going for Edison. Will be able to win the duel against the Ashe, and Revival have bought themselves time. Time to keep this payload stopped and time to deal with Saints before they come into powerful ultimates, because EDC is going to have that Bob, but Aspire is pretty close behind them. And Hazard is actually going to go onto the Torbjorn because you're acknowledging now that what is the stronger Genji, that those blades have just been shutting you down so quickly. HTP sticking with this Ana though means that you do want to try to build up to that anti, you do want to have that nano boost in the pocket, but it's very vital and dangerous.
Dangerous is, I think, the word that we're exactly looking for here. That Ana is so vulnerable. Lucky enough to make it up to the high ground alive, but Hazard will fall for their sins. Gravitic Flux is well thrown in by Revival, and they got way too greedy trying to take this positioning here. They had to go through so much damage to get there.
Revival, they got anti-naded as well, 4 of their members, but it doesn't matter. Saints aren't able to finish off the kills because they're, again, just vulnerable. When you've got that Ana, when you've got that Baptiste, you have to put Immortality Field in early to save one of those main supports always. Which means Revival can just press W and move into your composition, and you will have Immortality Field burned out of you far faster than Aspen's. And now, if you're Saints, you've got 3 minutes 10 seconds to work with, yes, but you're in danger of falling behind an ultimate economy, especially to lose the fight to an Immortality Field and an Amplification.
Oh, I love that halt into the accretion with the Ant Matrix up. That's almost a guaranteed kill onto Havoc. And they should be able to follow this up with enough ultimates with the halt. Nitch is getting way too big for his britches there, though. Gets himself a nice 2-piece, though, off the ledge, and that should be enough to end it.
Yeah. Revival looking extremely strong because they've cycled through ultimates and they've arrived on the ding-ding winner combination. This is a team fight victory if ever you saw one. Wub with the blade, Nitch with the supercharges. It all comes down to how Saints are able to deal with this. Hazard went on to the Torbjorn for this exact reason, to shut this Genji down, and it has to show here, otherwise you have no reason to be running this DPS.
Wub's blades have historically been somewhat ridiculous, even without Bongo. But he's got all the tools he needs. Ult is in. Hazard is not looking long for life. And now without the Immortality Field in this way, well, this is just farming for this guy at this point. He's just on a nice, leisurely stroll and making his way through the enemy team.
And the Torbjorn was not able to do anything to stop that Genji. You are coming into a Molten Core though, and you do want to keep him there to have that ultimate, because that can just immediately lock you up that payload. And that should set the place for Edici to come in with this bob, because Revival will be forced to push away so much to that Molten Core, and they don't really have the ultimate to engage in themselves this time.
No, Revival need to be very careful. They have the Grenadier Flux though for the follow-up, and they've already gotten really aggressive on E-Dicey on the Ashe, and now without that damage, Saints don't really have that much to make this push happen.
The Saints are going to find it so hard as well, because HTC is in danger of being staggered out, but Wub is in danger himself right now, able to get back to his team, but the Brigitte isn't, and that means you have to give up the ground. You have to let Saints onto that payload.
And now you let them on with all of those ultimates available. No longer, though, is Hazard. The Molten Core that could have been so deadly no longer means anything. With Wub going down, though, they do lose their clutch player. You guys need to be extremely careful about dying here, but the Saints are slowly bleeding out, and instead of marching in, the Saints go marching right on back to spawn.
Oh, and Lias actually swapped onto the Zenyatta. So you know Hazard isn't going to be that problem, isn't going to be coming for your backline with that Torbjorn pick rather than the Genji. So what do you have now? Orb of Discord, which means every single time that orb lands on one player from Saints' head, they're taking 30% extra damage. And when Aspire's got a Bob and Wub's so close to play, that is a team fight win if ever I saw one.
What great heads-up play to make that swap, but again, it just has to pay off. You have to be able to execute on it. The Orbs of Discord already creating so much damage. Bob doing a great job, though, of peeling away from that Molten Core that we said was relatively dangerous.
Well, Wub is going to be the most dangerous one right now. He's on the high ground. He's waiting to come in with that blade.
And now just coming through, swinging and dashing and doing what he does best. No one's even surprised anymore when this guy pulls out some sort of 3K blade.
And with 10 seconds left to spare, Saints aren't going to be able to recover. No one's going to be able to touch that payload.
I'm looking at those heroes for some sort of swap, but it just ain't happening. I will say this. We did say that a lot of these pushes ended at point B, so if you look at the history so far in Contender Trials in this meta, the Saints did make it in above average distance.
Well, I mean, there's one silver lining for the Saints right now. Attack Torbjorn is notoriously hard to pull off. Defensive Torbjorn, on the other hand, when it comes to shutting down Genjis, a whole lot easier. And so Wub might not be getting as much free reign as he did, but if that defensive Torbjorn does not work out, you've got to find some other way around this problem. And it has to be CC. Either you put a McCree in, or Hazard swaps over to the Mei, just something that means the Genji can't freely dash into your team and spend all the time in the world before he actually pulls Blade out and ults.
Ready for battle.
Yeah, Wub's been the real problem for them. No amount of swapping has done it. I think you want these hero swaps to come through. You want some sort of McCree to challenge it, but I think it's a fundamentally team issue. You need to have more than one person's focus on the Genji in order to take him down. Otherwise, you're just kind of tickling him and telling him to go away.
Another thing that you need to have is a safety cushion when it comes to your backline. And once again, HTP is on this Ana. And yes, you'll have the nano for Hazard, but Shiz already fills that with the supercharges. And yes, you'll have the anti-nades, but Salty can either just shift them away, Wub can deflect them, the Spire's not going to be anywhere near the team composition, so should be caught out by that. And then you've got to try and fit it between the two double shields, Salty and Nitch. So really, you're only taking it for the nano, but that's something that's already filled for your team composition. There is no reason, besides the Sleep Dart, to run this Ana.
I mean, theoretically, if the Ana lives, right, it's doing more than the Brigitte in most fights. The Brigitte is going to deny the Genji a little bit more value, but if you want to focus on that team fight on the tank, you can do that right now, and it should show here in this fight that the Saints have a ton of sustain on their side with the Ana, with these double main heals, but Revival are already taking so much space. Dynamite over top makes that a little bit more dubious for them, but they have so many sightlines that they can start to work with here that effectively doesn't matter. Hazard, though, nice sneaky kill onto his Spire, takes away a ton of those damage potentials, and now Wub has to be the man to come up big for Revival.
Well, Aspen's able to drop that amplification matrix, and this time the early one is finding so much value. The DC is completely undetermined right now on this high ground, but unfortunately you're not able to contest, and you give up point A. If you're saying we said that they needed to keep that point for as long as they possibly could, and now Shiz is going to get staggered out because you've swapped onto the Hammond to try to get onto the fight to try and keep that point contested. You've completely reset your ultimate economy, and you've allowed Revival such a nice space onto this high ground that's going to be so hard to pick them off from.
Yeah, that stagger is brutal. Getting set up on by this high ground, you had to swap to the Hammond, your wrist is gonna be late. There is so much wrong for this right now from the Saints. They absolutely must, and I mean must, set themselves up correctly in this fight and get an advantage early. Shiz going down does not spell good news though, as they are just going to be picked apart one by one. Hazard is committing to his blade though. The Nano is out, stunned and bopped away. Cannot get a reset, coming close, but it's only going to be one from the blade, and they needed so much more than that, Moxi.
Oh, and they used so much as well. It was a nano boost as well, and it went straight for the Brigitte, the only one pushing Cratos, who had the shield bash, who had the CC, and it meant that your blade found so little when it should have found so much. And Revival, they've got so many ultimates to come into this next fight with, and Saints don't have anything really to answer back.
Now Wub has his signature Dragon Blade. It's bound to be a big part with a Bob, and it's just going to make life a living hell right now for the Saints to actually try and hold against Hazard. Should be taken out here. 3 versus 2 on the card. Make that 4 versus 2 with the assistance of a Bob. So Revival are going to start making their way forward, and these health bars are going to start to drop. We're seeing that double main heal, though, come in handy. HCP was healing Gao for so long that it allows Shiz to come back in on the Wrecking Ball, and the Saints to slowly grind this one back out.
But if you're saying you had to swap Shiz once again off the Orisa onto the Hammond to get him back in time, and now he's got to go back to the respawn, and again swap onto the Orisa supercharges reset completely, along with Madeira's amplification matrix, because he's gone into the Lucio to try and just ferry everyone onto that point faster. If you're a Revival, you're going to be coming in not with a lot of ultimate, sure, but you've got a lot of time to work with. 3 minutes 22 seconds on the clock. You can afford to just poke and prod away and take Saints' Nano Blade to the face, come into that next fight with a blade of your own, and just manage to win it off that.
For the Saints, it's about ultimate efficiency, winning the long game, and making sure they have an advantage in the fights to come so that they can hold on, because like you said, so much time on this clock for them to burn through. That Nano Blade is extremely tempting, but we've seen Hazard miss with that before. He needs to do it appropriately with his team and be set up by a halt, by an accretion, and there's the halt, the Dynamite over top. The blade not quite finding value yet, but there it is. Just enough damage to get him over, get him that reset, get him a nice set of kills on the way.
And get Saints a whole boatload of ultimates to deal with in this next fight, because they've got the Sigma Flex now, they've got the Bob, they need to be winning these out. Budget fights, 1 ultimate, 1 fight win. Next fight rolls around, another ultimate, another fight win, and then Shiz will be up to the supercharges, Madeira will be up to the amplification matrix, and 2 minutes on your clock will go away in the absolute blink of an eye.
Yeah, I think the fight after this one is especially dubious, right? Because even with Bongo and Ant Matrix, it's not necessarily going to guarantee you a fight win. What will, though, is a ton of damage being thrown their way. And in Vulnerability Field, not an ultimate, it might as well be one in these times. 25 seconds cooldown, and the Spire's going to fall for it. Already forced out, Hazard goes down. But he doesn't have to play this fight. They didn't need him. Wub's coming through, trying to find damage, finding someone to pick off. But the sidelines are just being shut down here by Gao and Shiz.
I love how you actually see Wub Just go in, tickle away at Gao, force the Sigma into using the ultimate, and then get out. Because Revival are laughing right now. We talked about how Saints needed to hold on to these ultimates, win out one fight with one ability, and they're losing the fight though, and they put in both the ultimates that they had available to them, which means this recontest is going to be so easy for Revival to run away with.
Saints already committing this amplification matrix though. The ball's in for the stagger. Hazard was not able to keep himself alive though, most critically. So now it's all up at E-Dice to find the value, and his fire shuts him down immediately. Now no DPS. Hazard scrambling to get back on this point, to get back to help his team before Wub just mauls them all one by one. They fall, and Revival look to crack themselves open a point C.
Wub! Slow down! They have families! Revival! They've swapped Aspen onto the Lucio, and if you actually keep with this, there is going to be so much aggression. Well, no, they're not going to stick with it. There would have been so much aggression, but there would have been a lot less sustainability when you're running 2 off support. So Aspen's going to go back onto the Batiste, going to go back for that Immortality field. Hazard's got that blade. It's the play that you need to have because you don't have the ultimate to shut him down. It's just going to be that 25-second cooldown.
Yeah, both these Batistes have their immortality fields for a while, but neither of these teams have that much in the way of ultimates. Hazard has a blade, but this is one of those blades that's likely just to get out cooldowns. Revival have forced the Saints back, and the reaction is to just throw out the amplification matrix, buy that space back. Hazard's blade, though, completely dry, still manages to find himself a nice hit of kills. But Wub's doing it on the other end of the field, even without a blade.
The Genji's away, and so Revival play, and they're able to get the payload through because Saints fought. When that blade came through, they thought that they took it. They thought that there weren't anything that could shut Hazard down when it came to ultimates or cooldowns, and unfortunately, they scattered. They became just a little bit fragmented, and so Revival, they sent half of their backline to deal with the Genji, and when half of the backline are being bladed on by the Genji, the rest of the team just presses W and wipes out the remaining members of Saints.
It's been a DPS-centric meta for how they crack these fights open, finding those picks. But we're not just watching a DPS-centric meta have some sort of small difference. This feels like every time that we're seeing an even Genji fight, right? Wub takes it up a notch, and then we see Hazard kind of come up, and then Wub just kicks in a high gear and kills all 6 of them. And I don't know how he does it, because you've seen my Genji. I just have to live vicariously through these ones and like hope they do something cool, because I'm not going to, and Wub's like giving me the time of my life right now. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really like
there's a slight difference between how Wub and Hazard play, and it's all about the baits, the decoys. When Hazard wants to draw an ability, an ultimate out from the other side, he blades. He pops that ultimate, he hopes that that threat hanging over the team's head is going to be enough for them to turn around and be forced to deal with him. When Wub wants to force out an ultimate or ability, he goes in. He does a little bit of damage, he tickles away, he gets the target below 50%, he forces them to suddenly think, is it worth me going down here because I hold on to my ultimate? Or is it worth me investing my ultimate, maintaining my life in this fight, maintaining my team's composition, and giving that ultimate away for the betterment, the greater good in the long haul? Wub is so good at getting in, at not blading, at just using Shuriken to threaten, pull out all of this utility. We saw it. The Sigma Flex was committed. Because if you lose that Sigma, it's like losing an Orisa. You have to put an ultimate in to make up for the amount of damage, the pressure, the space that is suddenly absent from your side. And Wub is doing such a good job of pushing Saints into these horrible places where they can't hold on to these ultimates to deal with him in Blade. They've got to put them in when he's just the normal Genji with the 30 damage shurikens. It's absolutely terrifying to witness.
All right, it's a scary prospect right now, but let's take a breath, right? Saints, they've got a lot to deal with. They need specific ideas as to what to figure out. You're Saints coach right now, and you can tell them one thing. What do you think they need to change gameplay-wise as a team to beat down Revival and Wub at the spearhead?
May. That's it. It's literally, you put a May in, and suddenly all that Revival is trying to do just goes away. Because Revival, they base themselves around, they come in, they cripple your ultimate economy by baiting you into these plays and pushing you against the walls and going after players who can't sustain themselves, who can't be away from the team composition without it crumbling around them. And May comes in, the Genji can't go anywhere near, because you'll get primary fired up if you go too far away from your team, and Wub is a very aggressive Genji. It's just that he has so much space. Because Saints, when they try to deal with him, they scatter, they give him all of that breathing room, and he just gets the stepping stones his way through each one of these members. And Mei comes through, and you've got that separating tool that splits the Genji away, that keeps what's sustaining him with those two supports constantly pumping him full of health, completely devoid from every single combat. And not only that, but Blizzard, because Blizzard has many ways that you can play around it. It tends to be that immediate force of a lot of ultimates coming out from the other side, similar to how we see Genji Blades, but you can also use it to react. In fact, we're seeing more and more now, Blizzards come through as soon as they hear the Genji Blade, and not only do you think of trying to catch the Genji out, no. Your entire team runs into the center of the Blizzard, and it acts as a massive big old umbrella because the Genji can't get close. He can't bleed into this Blizzard because he'll be caught out, and your entire team is safe, snug as a bug in a very cold rug.
That's one way to put it. I think it needs to be that, though, right? We've seen the Mei before, earlier on Monday, come in and find massive success. I actually don't think I've seen a team lose a map when running the Mei, and every single time it's been a change because there's been a Genji difference. They just swap on over to the Mei, and we saw they tried the Torbjorn, but it just didn't do nearly enough, especially on the attack to shut down the Genji. I think the Mei is a much more direct Genji counter, whereas the Torbjorn is better whenever the opposing team tries to counter you with dive. But the Mei is something that we haven't seen yet, and it kind of brings into question the hero pools of these teams and whether or not they have that option.
Yeah, but heading into Route 66, you have to ask yourself, how and where are these fights going to actually take place? Because if it's on the high ground, and if you think that there is going to be a proper dive coming for you, then it's going to be better to take the Torbjorn. But if you feel it's only going to be the Genji on his own, it's a lot better, a lot safer to take the main. So my eye is going to be on Saints and their DPS line, because the supports are doing fine. The supports are doing a great job. The immortality fields are on point. The Brigida shield bashes always come through when you want it, even the front line as well. It's only the fact that they're forced to commit ultimates early on into these engagements to try and keep wobs off their back that is undoing everything Saints are trying so hard for.
Well, Saints have a lot to fix. The map 1 was dicey. Map 2, it only got worse. Revival are showing us better and better looks right now, but it's up to them to finish this off. And this is a map that can be extremely polarizing in how you attack it, right? You have the option of dive, which is an option that Saints may want to be taking here. It's whether or not it's in their wheelhouse that I think is going to be the main question as far as that goes, though.
Yes, and I would adore to see them come out with the pirate ship. But the pirate ship has sort of fallen on the wayside when it comes to how you want to attack Route 66, purely because it's just so easy to counter. You grab a Mei, you grab a Sombra, EMP, Blizzard comes through, and suddenly that pirate ship just doesn't really have much wind left in its sails anymore. You do need to have that constant high ground pressure, so either the full commitment to dive or the hybrid that we're seeing much more of with that Genji coupled up with the double shielding, which is such a burden because you can't go for the full dive counter of your entire composition, swaps to CC, and you try to deal with the entire dive because it's not an entire dive. And it would be 6 players putting themselves into a box only to counter that one player on the Genji. So you've got to be very careful and lenient about how you place those dive counters, and that's why we're seeing Torbjorns sometimes come through, and when teams go for the entire swap, they tend to fall off because they can deal with the Genji, but suddenly they're really ill-equipped to deal with the rest of the team.
Yeah, and with both of these teams kind of going for the mirror matchup, in fact, going exactly for the mirror matchup as the Roadhog is swapped off, I think this definitely bodes a lot better for Revival. There was no adaptation from the Saints here.
Well, I mean, look, though, there is going to be the slightest little crack in this mirror composition. HTP once again on that Ana, and this time we need to see bigger anti-nades, because anti-nades can be such a good initiating tool, but you have to have a team that immediately collapses in on a team that are purple.
This double shield, though, is going to be actually fairly stagnant for the first part of the map. Again, it's a battle of attrition. Both teams are playing for picks, so it isn't until it reaches that second corner of the girl that it's actually going to become a little bit of a problem, and we should see Saints drop. Until then, it's Revival pushing this cart and just doing their damnedest to stay alive.
Yeah, Saints just going to be hauled up on the high ground. They managed to get Aspire, though, and that should be the green sign for these guys. A lot of damage gone by the way of Revival.
And the name of the game here, though, is don't get too aggressive, don't put yourself out of position, and that's exactly what they've done. They drop down safely, finish off these last goal members, You and I, Mox, we've seen a couple times. Teams will get a little bit too aggro here. Drop in and lose 3v6, which is not what we're watching right now.
You know, this is so safe, so clean at the moment. Shiz goes down. HCP is able to trade out the Orisa. Both of these guys going to be lacking, but Cow is able to pick up the Brigitte, and that means it's time to get out if you're Revival. Sigma, he's not going to be long for this ward. In fact, if he stays here much longer though, he's going to be staggering himself out. He's trying to build up to that Sigma Flux, but Sigma Flux is not what you want to open up this next fight, not when it can be made null and void by Madero with that immortality field. No. You need Aspen to come in with this amplification matrix to buy yourself the space to bypass the high ground.
Well, they need to start out with that Ant Matrix at some point here, but they're taking their sweet time. They chuck it out, and it's going to cause Hazard to go down way too early. 76% to a Blade as well. This gives Revival the space on card that they wanted. The Bob is going to act as a Steeler 6 member right now, but the Ant Matrix being used coinciding with it is a huge waste of an ultimate. Oh, but Niche falls regardless.
Taro uses Amplification Matrix to keep the Bob healed up and alive, so there's nothing Revival can do to try and swipe him to the side. Instead, they have to take the damage, but Wob, able to manage to get a couple of people before he gets back to his team, means that Revival are just waiting for Aspen to come back, and then they can initiate. If you're Saints, you have to get an early pick-off to buy yourself the time, otherwise you are going to be eating a Genji Blade coming on through that you're just not quite ready to deal with Hazard being 12% off a Blade of his own.
Yeah, I was going to point out Hazard's Blade, but honestly, when both Wub and Hazard have him on the board, I kind of know what I expect to see. Right now, though, Hazard has to break that pattern, has to come up mass. That's just showing him anything he can do. He can do better. Coming in straight into the Immortality Field, stunned up, dashing through. You put yourself in a tiny room in a Blade Revival. I'm not sure what you expected to happen.
Yeah, sometimes you really don't want to be in those tunnels, and that was one of them. But if you think you had to invest the Nano Blade, and that's two ultimates, all the while Revival is quietly keeping hold of Wub's Blade of his own, and that means you may not have a Nano Boost to give it the oomph, but you've still got Niche, you've still got the Superchargers, and so you're going to have 6 members with that damage amplified rather than just the one. Saints are going to have to give up that high ground yet again if they want to survive.
Yeah, they're cowering behind that big Earl sign, and the threat of all that damage is going to be a real problem for them, but Revival, they're waiting for the right opportunity to use it. Drop it in onto the low ground, and like you said, they get off that high ground or die. Gal's not even going to give it an option, though. It's the second the dive comes in, Wub goes down. Amplification Matrix, just more time being bought off the clock here by Revival. Again, layering up that Bob and the Amplification Matrix. So Saints are just going to back away from it, wait for it to be over, and now they have an opportunity to re-engage with 5.
You have to be very careful though, because EDC is going to be coming back into this fight, and he can flip those numbers immediately with that Bob, the 7th member of your team.
Hazard goes down 90% to a Blade as well. That's a massive pick for Revival, but Wub falls as well. Both Genjis now out of the fight. Aspire's playing in OT, trying to get on with this Tracer, trying to put in some sort of damage, but it is looking like a stronghold from the Saints here on Route 66.
Yeah, Aspire on that Tracer, trying to make an absolute miracle happen. But when you're against 6 people and you don't have the support and you don't already have a pulse bomb packaged and parceled and ready to leave at that doorstep, there isn't a lot you can do.
Well, that was a surprise. There was no adaptation from Saints. Revival did the same thing but found far less value. And that really needs to change on this attack, right? You have to shut them down. You got full held on Route 66, no less. We talk about getting held at B on Blizzard World, but this is kind of a disaster for Revival. It's fallen apart for them.
Yes, it is probably the worst thing that could happen, because you're going to have 2 good, clean fights, and then that third one is just going to be an absolute scramble, where all of the members that you have remaining are just going to have to hightail it. And you're going to be forced to swap your composition off just to get back in time onto the Hammond, onto the Tracer, onto all of these things that have the chance to get from respawn just a little bit faster onto that cup. But that means you're resetting your ultimate economy. You're resetting all of the damage that you can do as well, because that's chip damage. Hammonds can roll around, Tracers can try and go up for a little bit of the pew-pew with those pulse pistols. But it's not enough. It's not that massive big 2-tap potential that an Ashe holds above a DPS's head.
No, I mean, there's a reason it's the meta composition. The second you get forced off of it, you're inherently going to put yourself at a relative disadvantage. However, it's definitely a hold that we can see done. I mean, we just saw it be done. And I think a lot of that was due to just control and better use of ultimates by Saints that round. They were able to maintain their economy. They were getting value out of a majority of their ultimates, and they were winning fights by grinding them out using that double support composition. Because even if Madero went down, even if HTP fell before they nanoed, before they used the amplification matrix, they still had plenty of heals to back it up. And so they're able to keep their tanks alive in fights where normally they wouldn't be able to, and the composition that Revival is running isn't able to.
Yeah, but there is one big old danger for the defense right now. You have to win these fights. You have to maintain control of this high ground, because once you lose control of high ground, once you lose control of big Earls, it's gone for good, and you won't be able to get properly back into these fights without taking so much poke damage by the attackers who will be set up in the space that should be yours. And it's so hard, because you either have to go for that high ground ramp approach, or you go for those tunnels, and you'll be boxed in. You'll be taking spam damage from the Ashe, you'll be taking poke shurikens from the Genji, who can just zip on through and dash right through your squishies, and then you'll be down a support, you'll be down a DPS, and you just won't be able to recover.
I'll say this much. If there's any way to put it, it's that it's now or never for Revival. You have to show up. This needs to be the best Overwatch you have played all day. You showed us good stuff in map 1, wasn't quite enough. Pulled out a map 2 that looked extremely dominant, but then you start to fall off because the Saints have adapted. They're coming in. They're using their ultimates better than ever. You set yourself up for Hazard's Nano Blade, which was just a massive mistake in a fight that they shouldn't have had to give away. And all of a sudden, the pressure is getting to them. All these little mistakes are starting to add up, and the team's really crumbling around it.
And unfortunately, it's the worst time, because remember, it's the first of 2. You need to take Route 66 to take the series. And so there's a whole checklist that these guys need to have, and it's a long one. So high ground control, ultimate economy control, first frags going over to their side, keeping the backline safe, keeping the frontline having that constant pressure, making sure the payload doesn't just breeze past them when they're all sitting up on the high ground. So you've got to allocate someone to go from the low to the high ground to moderate where that cart goes. It's going to be a long, long map for these guys.
Long time ahead from Revival, but such a short distance for the Saints to actually cover. At this point, there's a couple of things you can rely on, right? Finding those frags off those Halt Accretion combos, off the Halt Dynamites that we've seen out of Edicey and Gao, but also the Nano Blade from Hazard. It's just so scary. And the question is, does he swap back? Yeah, okay. Hazard should be able to go right on back, and Revival, with his aggressive hold, are going to get pushed out of position pretty much immediately.
While trying to do a little bit of damage, build up that blade faster than Hazard. He is ahead in ultimate economy, and he's going to have to stay there though, because if Saints hit their ultimate first, Revival are going to have a real hard time pulling any fight back to their side.
Well, there is one thing I'll say, Madero's already at 30%. Like we mentioned before, that amplification matrix can be so good at taking down the high ground, but what finds a pick onto Hazard, who is getting way too aggressive on Genji, and Gao's going to fall after that with that Saints need to get out, giving as little ultimate charge as possible, but it looks like they're all just going to fall.
Revival able to win step 1 of many in this fight for Route 66. Wob able to keep himself alive even though he gets halted too. He is 30% away from this blade, and this, if this is successful, this could be Revival's crowning moment where they're able to just shatter Saints, shatter this composition, shatter the ultimate economy to the point where they can't recover.
It's not much of a way into this fight. You've got Dynamite on one end, you've got Wub up the other, and he's becoming such a problem to deal with. Hazard's only 33% to a blade. You have to pray this amplification matrix gets some sort of value, but not even managing to do that. There's a Sigma beating up your Genji on the other side of the field. Hazard's dropping from bottom of his HP bar to the top of his HP bar repeatedly. Oh, the flux from Salty completely denied by Hazard. Blade's going to be finding massive value here, even without the nano.
And if you're Revival, now you're going to be on the back foot. Aspire is able to pick up Hazard. And this payload, though, it started moving. And Revival used so much. They used so much in that fight, though, because they knew they had to secure themselves the high ground. They knew they couldn't give that fight up. Otherwise, it would be so hard for them to intrude back onto this payload with it being so close to that finish line. And even if they can touch, they've got to deal with Hazard's blade.
Oh, but Hazard, he has to come up big. This is how he closes it out for his team. The Blades have not been there the entire day. And you know what? They're going to hold on to it for a rainy day right about now. Back away. They know they have time for at least another fight.
This is risky, though, because now you've given up that high ground. Now you've allowed Aspen to get back into that prime position for Batiste to be. Not encouraged upon by an enemy team, setting up the place, setting up all of that healing for your front line, and Niche is so close to that supercharges. But if you're Saints, If you're Saints, you've got your win condition. Hazard's still got the blade. Shiz has got the supercharge. It's all down to Revival. That rally is not going to last long. You have to get the Genji out of the way before the armor goes out.
Take him down. I love this coach gun into the Bob. Force him down onto the ground without any cooldowns and set Hazard up for the blade of his life, but his fire immediately takes him out of the sky, shuts down the hopes and dreams of Saints. This push slowly crumbling in front of them, a minute going down on the clock, and it's starting to feel a lot more doable for Revival right now.
Saints though, they've got 2 ultimates for a rainy day. They're going to have to use them. They're going to have to find so much value because it will be Amplification Matrix and Nano, and that's a lot of damage. But it's so hard to set up, Dill, when you're not in control of the space. Gao is going to go onto the Winston just so HTP's got a better target to Nano. Jump on the roof, scatter all of Revival down into the waiting of Smedera with this Amplification Matrix, but you've got to do it fast because one's going to be looking for a blade, and that could be what wins Revival this match.
30-second final fight there. Winston getting extremely aggressive. The Tesla cannon going hog wild up on the high ground, but not much value being found from instead. It's Aspire's Bob doing all the work. The 7th member comes in the final hour. Found another one onto Madero. Now trying to close it out. Wub doing what he does best. Breaks out the Nano Blade. 7 seconds ticking down on the clock. And Mox, you and I thought it couldn't be done, but Revival have clutched out on Route 66 to take the series.
I've just got to deal with the Sagas MCs onto the Doomfist, but Wub's able to take him out. Madera not able to use that Fade ability for longer than Moira. And Revival with a monstrous hold. We said there was a checklist. We said those guys could not put a single foot wrong. And my goodness, they showed up to.
That was a ridiculous map of Overwatch. And it shows exactly how Double Shield, I know, don't put me up on trial for this or anything, but Double Shield can be exciting. And I think that's why. It's because not every map's going to be finished. A lot of these end early. They end at point A, they end at point B, and it gets so tense for some of these teams, but Revival were able to keep up with the pressure. And when they needed it most, both their DPS, both their tanks, their supports, flawless play from them on the final map.
Aspire, you've got to take your hat off to that guy. He shut Hazard down before the blade could come through. Moment of glory number 1. Moment of glory number 2, when Gao goes onto the Winston and the Nano comes through and he tries to go for that high ground, Coach Gun comes out, and away goes that setup. All crumbles to nothing, and it's all down to Aspire with that Ashe cooldown.
All right, Mox, that was an exciting match. But you know what? We've got more, don't we?
We do, and it's sure to be just as exciting. Whether or not it will be as close to Route 66 remains to be seen, but my goodness, I hope so.
Well, it's bound to be a good one. Ladies and gentlemen, though, we're going to be back with game number 2 in just a little bit, so keep your eyes on your screens and your butts in your seats. We'll be back momentarily. back, ladies and gents. After a quick break, we're all set up and ready for match number 2. It's Skyfoxes taking on Cratos in the group on the other side of the board, but they're feeling just as good as we are about this match and about supporting Tier 2. Mox, it's been a nice little break. You've gotten a breather. You've seen some really great Overwatch today. How are you feeling about this match in particular?
Well, I'm all ready to see this one go down because it's that first to 2 format, and we hate to see the 2-0s though, don't we? More Overwatch always means better Overwatch. So fingers crossed we'll get to see Route 66 popping up across our screens a second time tonight.
Yeah, Route 66 was a really interesting decider, and honestly, with the given meta, I think it's a really, really exciting map. Ilios as well introduces so much chaos into pretty much everything you want to do because you have the option of running a couple different things there, but there's one thing that we need to see in these series. It is fast adaptation from these teams. You have 2 maps to lose, you have 2 maps to learn. Well, you have like 1.5 maps to learn, but you better learn quick is my point.
Well, technically, you have one first fight to learn. You need to adapt on the fly, and so we will see teams coming in with that mirror matchup, and as soon as they lose that first match, well, they tend to immediately swap their composition off to try and route it and deal with it, and that is going to be something that these guys are both going to have in absolute bucket loads, because there are 32 heroes in Overwatch currently, and with Contenders having absolutely no hero bans on the horizons whatsoever, you've got all you want to pick from to shut down your opponents.
Yeah, now let's go ahead and take a look at the players that are going to be manning up these heroes. We've got Cratos locking up default Maxwell, Rocket, Krari, Gunther, and Haruhi. Meanwhile, on the side of Skyfoxes, it's going to be Atlas, Aether, Faded, Frosted, Fallen, and Autumn Souls. But I've got to say, this Kratos roster is looking spicy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. One thing that we do have to point out, though, is Rocket is actually an EU player. This is his first time playing on an NA team, and we might see just a little bit of a difference, a disparity, if you're going to have ping issues and if you're going to have, well, a new team that you're trying to gel with. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Skyfoxes are going to be trying to take advantage of that slight disconnection and turn that very little crack into a massive big old crumble.
And right, there's so many different ways that these teams do crumble. We talked about it earlier. The second you lose a player, the whole fortress just tends to come down with it. And time again, we see, even if it's just the Genji, even if it's just that poke damage, you lose so much the second that any of these heroes fall. We've seen teams counter that by running the double main support. We've seen teams run it by playing the Mei when you start losing the Genji matchup. We've seen the Torbjorn whenever people start playing dive into it. This double shield is so viable to be played against a ton of different things. Now that the Genji is part of it, I think it's a real threat.
And I mean, you tend to see as well, not just swapping onto counters to deal with it, but putting ultimates in. And the one thing that we've been hitting so constantly tonight, or the one thing that will never change in Overwatch that would always be important, is using those ultimates at the right time. You cannot put in a Sigma Flex or a sound barrier or anything to try and make up for the loss of a player, because it will always come back and haunt you. It will always mean that you're missing that aggression that you so desperately need to keep the other team at bay. And heading off into Lighthouse, well, you've got a whole array of compositions that can be run on this map. We haven't got to see Farah yet tonight, but she can be extremely strong. It is, of course, that trade-off. You do a lot of damage in the sky, but you will constantly have a pocket in the sky with you, taken away from your team, cutting off 50% of the healing that should be there for the front line. And that's why we're seeing just a little bit more towards that Batiste, that Brigitte, even the Ana Brigitte, where you know you're going to have constant focus on the front line rather than that 50-50 inconsistency throughout.
Yeah, we're seeing very different approaches to these maps by these teams already. Kratos wanting to opt for that double shield, very meta composition with the Brig Baptiste. But Skyfoxes, this is curious. I actually want to see what Atlas swaps onto after this. I think it's going to be a Genji, but it really could be a number of things. We'll go on to it, though, as they're running full dive, but with an Ana here that might get bullied a little bit by Maxwell if they're not careful.
But you will find a lot of value with this Nano Boost onto Atlas. So easy for that Genji to pick up value when he's got steroids on his side.
And now with the Winston trying to dive in, the Coach Gun's going to be just waiting for the time being, but the Dynamite doesn't really connect on it that much, so no damage really being thrown the way of Skyfoxes. All they need to do is be very careful that they don't give anybody up early here as they rotate over into point.
Skyfoxes Well, you lose your mech, but that's a lot of heal gone for your team, but it doesn't matter. Atlas and Aether able to come in huge with the picks. Buying you time should be able to buy you that first pick percentage.
I love the recognition from the Skyfoxes there that they were rotating. That was the perfect time to catch them out in the Baptiste. You got caught lacking, but I'm sorry.
Well, we did talk about how if you lose that first fight, you would immediately be swapping your composition up, and we're immediately seeing default onto that McCree to try to deal with this Genji, with this Tracer, but you've only got one flashbang, and it's going to have to cover the backsides of both of your backline, and it's going to be so hard to shut this Blade down, even with Atlas coming in so far away, but Faded, he's going to be the real problem right now. He's coming into this Primal Rage, and Cratos don't have the real matters to deal with them.
No, and with so much high ground control, this is just going to be time off the clock. Kratos, they have to move the point. They have to attempt to take it so that Skyfoxes have to dive them, because otherwise it's going to be time off the clock. Haruhi falls first again, though. Pulse bomb on the Orisa, and it's all over already here for Kratos.
The one thing, if you're Cratos, you can take solace in, is that it wasn't one ultimate. It was a whole bunch of them. Even worse, Autumn Souls used that nano boost before Atlas pulls out that blade. And so it will be a dry blade in all manners of the meaning, which means when Kratos come with a blade in of their own and they can put it behind rocket supercharges, it will find just a little bit more bang for its buck.
Absolutely. Croy as well can deny the dive with this Gravitic Flux. It's something we've seen multiple times with this new meta. It can be extremely powerful, but it needs to be played perfectly. If you only catch one and it's not valuable, looking for the right opportunity now. Maxwell comes in with the blade, slicing his dicing his way on through. Oh, he's going to chase after the Winston. Down goes Faded, and the follow-up damage is there. Kratos should see the first point take for the day.
Skyfoxes going to be holding on to that place yet again, and if they hold on just a little bit longer, Autumn Soul should actually be coming into that nano boost a second time. But if you're Kratos, you've got the means to shut this team down before they even get to see that point door. You've got the supercharges, you're going to have default on this McCree with the Deadeye, and now that you've won that fight, you can take up that high ground position. You can set this McCree's ultimate up not just to be a zoning ultimate, but to find the picks.
Yeah, this is where the dive really struggles, right? Getting these players out of position one by one takes a serious amount of time. That Deadeye's a real threat. The Bongo as well can kill you in its own right. Atlas has a blade. It's not going to be dry, though. Autumn Souls has charged up a nano boost, so I think that's exactly what they're waiting for. And this nano blade must connect. This is their way back into the game. This is their way of finishing it off. And here he comes, Atlas with the blade through and through, but finally the immortality field falls, and with that, Kratos crumble. And Skyfox can take the point right on back.
Yeah, and it's going to be that final fight for Kratos, and they, because they lost that fight, don't have anything to try and get this touch through. Gunther's going to go into the Lucio, that last-ditch attempt to get this team back in time to contest. Maxwell just needs 5% more with this blade, but Aether's got the pulse bomb. He's sneaking, he's creeping, he's hiding behind the bush. He can shut this all down!
Well, it's gonna be the rewind taken away. Now Haruhi also has to have that immortality field gone, which is a huge tool that they needed to contest. But Kratos have found their way into this fight. Trades 1 for 1. It's sloppy all over. Everyone's picking at scraps, but it seems like Kratos are just barely getting the edge right now.
Maxwell was able to do just enough with that blade, and Kratos hanging on by the skin of their teeth, and it's something that they're going to have to do again. Only this time, they are not going to have the element of surprise. They're not even going to have any ultimates to do it with, because that entire composition swap means reset on all of those bars. So Skyfoxes just have to wait just a little bit longer before Primal Rage comes online, before Blade comes online, and Gunther is so far away from the Science Barrier necessary to deal with it, because Haruhi is onto that Moira. You don't have the CC in place to deal with the Genji when he comes for your back.
It's a completely different matchup with the dive versus dive. A lot of it comes down to the value that the DPS are going to get Faded, though. Popping the Primal Rage, trying to separate away players, but not finding all that much success. All the mobility is allowing them to just run away. Kratos allow them to have point, allow them to have pressure, because this counter dive is coming in and is bound to be strong.
Well, you've allowed them to try and take it, but you're not going to allow Skyfoxes that pulse bomb, and that is huge. Curry is able to deny that one, and that means your support can stay just a little bit longer.
Oh, here comes Atlas. The Nano's online, but they're not going to use it. They realize they don't need it to win this fight, and that is very, very smart from them.
Yeah, but you just need this final last fight. If you're Cratos, you're not going to have the chance to go for that contest, because you're just constant. You can see Default not wanting to go too far away, knows that you've got to keep tagging on, buy time for Maxwell to come back in with this play. The Hail Mary for the team.
Oh, Maxwell finds the first, looking for more, takes Frosted out of the mech, Rocket buying a ton of time on point right now. as Cratos are slowly grinding the fight out in their direction. No team can afford to give it up, but a nice bonk off does not let Fallen touch, and it feels like that was Kratos's, but my god did they have to work for it, Moxi.
Oh, those swaps onto the support lineup, the Lucio, the Moira, they're so stellar. Because you have Atlas on that Genji. You don't have the CC to stop him, but what does the Genji do? How does he connect to that support? Because the Moira's just going to fade away. The Lucio's just going to speed away. There's nothing that the Genji can really stick onto and farm the blade, not like how Maxwell is able to just continuously have that ultimate cycling on its way. All the while, Skyfoxes don't really have anything to deal with it besides the shield bash. And now heading on to well, we're going to see yet again the Symmetra's just try to get a little bit of that earlier touch with this teleporter out of spawn. And yet again, it should be a swap going on to the Genji. Atlas and Maxwell both going to be at each other's throats, both going to be aiming for those Batiste in the backline to open up things for their team.
And every time we see Will, we see this fight in the exact same place, trying to take control of the mini room. The halts are not going into the well. The environmental kills are not of plenty. It's just the Genji's trying to get value in the backline, and you're either going to die or you're going to get that first kill. But look at this, Cratos. They've completely separated away the players of Skyfoxes, but they're losing members even though they're gaining ground here. The back room, the home right now of Skyfoxes, making it their own, and they're going to finish off the fight with it.
So Cratos go for the separate play. They try to set up a crossfire with Maxwell, with Default taking the sides, but unfortunately Skyfox's composition flourishes when they're all fighting together, and because they're all fighting together, Fallen's able to get so much healing going through that you're able to build up amplification matrix before Harry even gets a sniff of 70% of theirs. And so now, if you're Skyfoxes, you've got the ultimate economy in your favor. You're going to be coming into the Sigma Flex, Aether is going to be coming into the Deadeye. Kratos' big chance, all the rest on Maxwell getting in and using the play safely.
But Default ends Fallen early, and that's all the heals gone now for Cratos. This fight gets extremely difficult, and with that, the Genji's gonna come in, pick them apart one by one. The dry blade doesn't matter. The damage is all permanent when there ain't a main healer around.
Oh, Skyfoxes, you need to keep your Batiste close. You can't let him go down when he is so crucial in your composition. That immortality field, that healing, once it's denied, your entire composition is denied its existence as well. And now Cratos, they've set up. They've got this rally. They can pop it. They can buy Haruhi the time to get just that little bit closer to the amplification matrix, all the while using it to rip away Autumn Soul's rally of their own.
Now, a lot of what Cratos have, though, is stall. If Skyfoxes can outplay it, get out of LOS, of the bongo, of the potential amplification matrix, then you're looking at a very solid fight. They've wrapped their way all the way around, and now we might see the Hulk come into play, try and pull somebody into that whole amplification matrix out in a great immortality field to be keeping them alive, and allow them to use the Deadeye alongside the Gravitic Flux. They get absolutely no value. Cratos are running out of gas in the tank, and Skyfoxes are coming at them with all they got.
Oh, Skyfoxes! They're in the side room, but they're not able to survive because look at that crossfire! Default is completely away from the fight and gets free reign, spamming damage, spamming dynamite into that side room, and Skyfoxes are all clumped up, so they have to take the brunt of it. Default cycles up to 86% of an ultimate, and it is absolutely huge. That's the damage Cratos needed to tip that balance into their favor, and now it's 78%. It's coming into this final fight. Maxwell's got a blade. Skyfoxes, they've got a blade of their own. It can be bigger. It has to be bigger because Faded has some supercharges, and this is what the team needs to get this flip in their favor. Otherwise, they've lost. Really.
Maxwell goes down with the blade, though. That's so big, and Aether's continuing to pop off on number 3, finding pigs left and right, a third to his name. He might end this fight in his own right.
And if you're Skyfoxes, you didn't have to use your blade. You only had to use your supercharges. So now you can use that really proactively. Use it to get into that backline. Use it to pressure Haruhi and Gunther so that Kratos are left holding on to this blade, holding on to this bulb, because you need time. You need to get that first pick. You need to buy space. You need to have this point in your possession for a couple more fights before you can rest easy.
Yeah, we're sitting at least 2 fights away, and 2 fights of ultimates is not what Cratos has. They need to buy time. They need to get those online, just like you were saying, Mox. Maxwell waiting for the right opportunity, though. You want to be proactive, but you definitely don't just want to throw it in for nothing, and here he comes, slicing through the immortality field, now through the helpless bodies of Skyfoxes. One by one they fall, and Atlas isn't even able to get near the value. However, the Gravitic Flux from Frosted may have just been enough here. 1 versus 1, Sigma versus Genji, but Maxwell He's got 200 HP and a point to his name now.
And Rocket's actually going to go onto the Hammond so you can get back. Faded! Going for that mirror swap as well. It's all about who is able to get onto this point fast enough. The Skyfoxes are forced into that overtime fight.
Last time it was Cratos who were able to come in for the stagger. Skyfoxes now must do the same. D.Va Ball desperately making their way in. Aether firing through this amplification matrix, but he's not able to find any connection. Instead, it's their Genji that goes down. The Genji that was needed to be alive to poke at those things, start working on those health bars. Cratos are now going to be able to get their way in to the backline, separate away these players with their newfound dive composition, and start trying to take away the snap.
Well, you can see Maxwell's got another blade bolt, and Cratos are going to be picking up Ilios. We talked about it. We said when you lose any of these members of your composition, you are immediately going to be lacking. But my goodness, Cratos, they have such a weight. Normally, you see teams go for the backline or the front line, try and take the supports or the tanks out of the way first. Not Cratos. They aim straight for the DPS. And because you're lacking that amount of damage, first the one DPS falls, then the second so quickly after, and you just don't have anything to finish up those kills. Kills that Cratos are so good at setting themselves up. And even though that front line's still there, even though the backline's still standing, you don't have the damage needed to tip the scales in your favor, and Cratos walk away with every single team fight.
Yeah, and that's how it's felt every time. It's Cratos walking away with the team fights. Even when it's dicey, it feels like Cratos are allowing Skyfoxes to have ground so then they can take the ultimate game later. And Cratos feel like they're controlling the tempo of the game the entire time, not just from an ultimate perspective, but also from an ability-based perspective. The immortality fields are coming out earlier from Skyfoxes. They're being forced out of position a lot quicker than Cratos are being. And then even when the composition swaps come through and Cratos goes on to the dive, it feels like they're executing it a lot cleaner right now. Skyfoxes have a lot to clean up, but I think there's got to be at least one thing that's making up a majority of this difference for them, and that's got to be the pre-fight planning for me.
So if you look at how Skyfoxes handled when they had that point, when they knew that they had to deal with the Genji, when they knew that they had to deal with that Bob, they didn't. They completely ignored the problem, though. The fact that Maxwell was able to get into the entirety of that team's composition when they were in the side room with that blade, pull it out, and survive, that's the problem Skyfoxes are dealing with. They're not able to take these players out before the play actually comes through. And sometimes it's that 50-50. When the play comes through, they can either deal with it and they'll be able to pick up the point or win the fight, or they're just unable to because they're ill-equipped. They don't have the distance, they don't have the timing, they don't have the luxury of setting up to try and give themselves a little bit of an easier job at doing it. And I think once we see the pre-planning start to just come in a little bit more for this team, then absolutely we're going to have a much more even fight.
Yeah, and it's happened to Skyfoxes a few times where because they're not pre-planning their fights effectively enough, they're using either one too many or one too few ultimates. And I think that's kind of how close this game actually is. It may have seemed relatively dominant from Cratos. They may be controlling the tempo, but it's that close where that one ultimate matters so much in these fights into whether or not Cratos are able to roll the economy in their favor, into whether or not Skyfoxes are able to pull off the retake. Now, though, as we head into Blizzard World, that dynamic changes a little bit because the defenders now get to control the tempo a lot more.
And so you're going to be on that high ground. You're in the prime position to supercharge up your abilities, to boost up your ultimates, to be in the strongest possible position for when the attackers try to go onto the point. You have to utilize it, though. When you have that high ground, you need to be poking, you need to be spamming, you need to be doing absolutely everything to let your DPS have that breathing room, to be able to sit behind those double shields or even that single shield if you decide to opt into the Orisa Ball sort of play, and manage to make space, make room, give them the opportunity to shine before you all run with your tail between your legs onto the point to make sure that you don't give up a tick.
Absolutely, and I think giving up a tick is something that we haven't really seen. There hasn't been point pressure that hasn't been responded to by the defenders. I think a lot of that comes down to the defenders controlling the tempo. You're playing the double shield. It slows the match down by so much. It moves like molasses. Most of the pushes just fizzle out at B. And we're seeing so much difficulty actually taking space within a meaningful amount of time because these fights can last a minute and a half. And then you're just chipping away at the clock. Even if you lose point A, you might have spent 2 minutes there just shooting at shield and waiting for a pick to come through. And that's always going to be favoring the defender here. It's just a matter of who can make the most of that.
I mean, so if you're the attacking side, and you see that defense start to fall back, or you look at how point A is set up, and so we see the fights normally tend to be around the side of the point, right? On that right side or the left side, and as soon as the defense feel like they're giving way just a little bit in the shield battle, when they want to reset a couple of their cooldowns, they pull back into the actual side of point and just hide behind those little pillars. That is when the attackers need to get aggressive. You cannot pull back when the defense pulls back. You can't give them the room. You can't allow them to get that very brief reset. You have to pounce as soon as you see that weakness, and that's when we're going to see attackers walk away with A. If you give them that space, you'll be trying to come calling onto them, but they'll just have all of the resources to slam that door in your face.
Yeah, there's also one thing I've noticed from the attackers often in this map as well. It's that pincer maneuver. The second you get close to A, teams will put their Orisa around one side and the Sigma around another, and it can be extremely powerful. One thing I want to see from the defenders that I actually saw yesterday in EU Contenders trials are teams just collapsing and punishing these Sigmas for getting aggressive on angles they don't need to be on. Without a Lucio, without the things to get away, there are weak points if teams get too greedy on the defense.
Look, talk of getting too greedy, look at Frosted's position at the moment. This is the Sigma who was looking just a little bit lost, but just aren't able to capitalize.
They have gotten so aggressive. Skyfoxes, is this dive or double shield? What am I watching, Mox?
Any tank can be a tank hero as long as he's pushed from the distance far enough, but Cratos showing us that double shielding is not meant to be played for dive, because as soon as it comes that really close towards fight and you don't have that poke damage that you can be able to chip away the composition at, you fall really, really quickly.
Well, we talked about wasting a lot of time, but that was about 30 seconds of Kratos' time. They're going to happily take this point A and walk away with it. Skyfoxes have effectively gifted it to him. It's Christmas in July, I think.
It would have worked if you'd had a Lucio, if you'd had that engagement with speed boost or disengagement when things start going rough, and Hafer getting a little bit too cocky there, almost gift wrapped himself to a silver platter on Kratos' hands, but as it is, he's able to get back to his team. But if you're Skyfoxes, you are behind in ultimates, you are behind in pressure, you will have Ava sitting on the high ground with the rest of his team, but you need to set Fallen up for this amplification matrix and make sure that it's not too soon, otherwise Kratos is just going to disengage and wait it out.
Well, just as you said it, they're going to wait it out. Just back around this corner. It does give Skyfoxes a little bit of space to work with. Now you can push forward with the Gravitic Book. With the Blade, you have the tools to win the fight, but Kratos are looking to be proactive. It ended earlier. Skyfoxes again have gotten way too aggressive on this, and now they walk straight into the Gravitic Flux of Frosted, trying to close this one out. Aether firing like a madman in the Mega Room, but it's Kratos coming out on top. Maxwell and Default putting in an absurd amount of damage in that fight.
Skyfoxes, they're just not going for the poke war. They're not going for that war of attrition. They're going for flashy moments of brilliance, but when you're running double shield, flashy moments of brilliance get you nowhere. They get you staggered out. They get you lost fights, exactly like we're seeing. And Kratos, they're taking the high ground. They're taking this pole position where they can get that poke, where Default can be set up to get these early frags. And Aether's just going to have to look up into that Ash's face and deal with it.
Oh no, it's another rough fight here for Skyfoxes. They don't have the ultimates to take it away right now. They've already been ended by Maxwell. All the players with meaningful ability to stop it. Oh, Krari. I'm just gonna pretend he was trying to dodge Aether's shots from the 6-shooter. We'll give him benefit of the doubt.
You never know, like when that McCree is going to press that Q, especially if you're staggered out completely alone. Oh, he got the bad spawn draw, which means Kratos aren't slowing down anytime soon. They're getting the staggers on their side, and Skyfox is just going to have to give them ground while they wait to regroup, because they will be coming in with the only ultimates on the board. But again, they require space to actually set up. Space, which means you can't allow Kratos to disengage freely away from them.
Yeah, these should be a win fight for Skyfoxes, but again, like you said, if Kratos are smart, if they know what's coming their way, they should be able to back off. Amplification Matrix now used, that should cue them to just walk right on around this corner, stop using their shields, and get away. Maxwell falls, though, being really aggressive in the back line. They're punching him for that, and now that's the cue for Skyfoxes to move forward. Finally, this guy that we've seen from them, it should work out, but no! Look at Default behind all of them, putting in obscene amounts of damage from the high ground, and it's actually going to take away the entire fight.
Curry shouted, pull! Default shot into this guy. Everyone gets Sigma fluxed up, and it was just a shooting gallery for Default, who is burning his way towards an ultimate. If you're Skyfoxes, though, you've got that stopping power, you've got the Sigma flux. You know that you're going to pick up a vast majority of Kratos' players. It's about connecting the kills afterwards. Atlas can come in with that blade, with that cleanup.
Well, he's used it early. Faded takes down Haruhi. No more main heals for this team, which means they probably don't have the sustain to actually take a point C. And with that, Skyfoxes, yep, they're just going to allow this one to go by the wayside.
Now, Cratos looking a little bit more beaten down, I would say, for the first time in this map, as they'll be coming in with a blade, with a supercharges. Skyfoxes able to hold on, able to keep this pillage stopped and set Fallen up for a really nifty amplification matrix, and this is what you have to use to initiate. So you can't allow Maxwell to get into a position to get this blade off, because that supercharges is going to make it absolutely deadly if it does.
Absolutely, and with the bongo being there, there's nowhere to run for Skyfoxes. They're already pushed straight back into their spawn. You have to shut down this blade manually. Aether needs to hit shots, needed the shield bash, or just take Crary out of the game early, take out one of the tanks, and that's going to force Cratos to back off, at least buy you a little bit of time.
I mean, it's done enough. You're building up to Aether's Bob, so when Maxwell's blade comes through, you can just drop that ultimate and know that you've got at least a little bit protecting your back, but you will still have to deal with him and the entirety of Kratos' support lineup, because they're going to have that rally, they're going to have that amplification matrix. And you see what that payload is? It's still not all the way through C, which means Skyfoxes don't have that luxury of being able to back out and abandon it.
Aether is holding way too aggressive of an angle. Now without any damage, they're going to get just bladed down. We mentioned that Aether had to stop it, but if Aether's not even alive to do it, that's a free push for Cratos. Here comes the end of the map, and that's the first time in all of Contenders Trials this season that we have seen somebody complete Blizzard World.
Aether got far too aggressive, had to, I'm sure they were thinking go that aggressive because they needed that ultimate online. They knew that they needed that ultimate online, but that does not mean, it does not excuse you putting yourself in that line of fire completely alone with no one on your team to back you up when you're running that double shielding. The Orisa, the Sigma, they can't peel for DPS who are alone. And Ash may have the coach gun, but it has a cooldown. You're not like a Genji, you can't just automatically run up a wall whenever you see it. You've got to wait out the seconds, and that makes you vulnerable, especially because Kratos knew once Aether went down, the rest of Skyfoxes went down with him.
I mean, let's just be honest, Mox. That was a ballsy play. You go on that flank because you think you're going to clutch it out for your team, and you just immediately get shut down. And I think they pay for that big time, right? Completing this map is not an easy task. Every single meter on that final point is just exponentially harder than the last. Now Skyfoxes have an incredibly hard task of breaking open Cratos, who were, not to mention, gifted a point A earlier on in the map. If Cratos don't gift them a quick A take, Skyfoxes are going to be in a bit of trouble time-wise.
Well, Skyfoxes, we do know though, they rush. They go for these aggressive plays. They try to set the fight off as quickly as possible. So one thing that they're not going to be worried about is waiting, which means that you shouldn't be burning time off your bank setting up plays, but you also have to win the fights, otherwise that's a whole lot of time completely wasted.
Yeah, we've seen them get aggressive, which can pay off, like you said, by giving them multiple fights, but you give those away, you give away the ultimate economy, and Cratos is a team that will absolutely roll that in their direction. We saw it there on that last point. They managed to take it away with the bongo blade, and now Skyfoxes are getting just as aggressive as before. Aether, you're dropping real low, bud. Be very careful there. Frosted as well. That's what I was talking about earlier. They go for the pincer, and Cratos completely demolish it. Just collapse on the Sigma. Frosted goes, and with that, the whole team's gonna fall to bits.
When we see the pincer, it tends to be the Orisa, because you've got that fortify, you've got that hull. If you get intruded a little bit too aggressively on by the other side, you have the means to get yourself out and still alive. But the Sigma, as soon as you actually get close to him, a lot of his value is just completely denied, and you might be able to get the accretion play to give you just a couple of seconds, but it takes time to set that one up, and you can get caught out in the animation as well. And now Skyfoxes, they haven't really had the chance to set that win conditions onto the table. Atlas is going to be coming to that blade, but Kratos, they're so far away, they're going to have that immortality field, they've got that shield back, they can just immediately shut you down.
I mean, I'm watching Haruhi's amplification matrix. It is miles ahead of Fallen's, and that's going to show us exactly why. Now the DPS separated away from their tanks, separated away from their supports, person by person, this double shield composition looking less like a bunker, more like a battlefield torn to strew as Cratos ripped through their roster yet again.
If you're Skyfoxes, you need to come into this next one and pull ultimates out from the side of Cratos. Otherwise, they are just going to run away with this map by cycling through these ults, because you won that with an amplification matrix. And now you're going to have 5 ultimates available to you. You can win this next fight out with that Sigma Flex, the next one with Rocket Superchargers, the next one default will have a Bob for. If you're Skyfoxes, you need one good fight to establish yourself on this point and get those tick percentages going in your favor. You need to eco-push these out so that Cratos invests all of their ultimates and you hold on to it.
Oh, Cratos, though, they're getting so aggressive here. They want to be proactive. They want to get into assist this blade, force out those cooldowns so that Maxwell can start farming players and play of the game. Finds himself a nice make it for there with a finish off. 1:30 on the clock, though, and Skyfoxes have got to get this under control. They're bleeding profusely, and they're about to lose this match, Moxi.
Oh, they lost ultimates. They invested the Bob, the amplification matrix, those you're not going to have back for a few fights yet, and Cratos still have that high ground, still have the distance, so default with this Bob Rocket with these supercharges, they're going to find so much more value as opposed to Skyfoxes, who actually have to be alive to get into these fights to pop their Qs.
It's now or never for them, though. 1 minute on the clock. We know how long these fights can last. Going up the hall. The blade now in Skyfoxes. They've found a massive win off the back of Atlas, coming up with 4 to match that of Maxwell.
If you're Skyfoxes, you need to push forward aggressively. You are behind in time. You have to make up for it on point B, and we can already see Ava going aggressive alongside Atlas, seeing if they can get a stagger pick, seeing if they can delay Cratos from getting this next fight in, because Rocket's going to have those supercharges, and Harry, he's going to have that amplification matrix, but if you're Cratos, you're not going to have a main tank.
Yeah, that feels bad. This should... Big should be free for Skyfoxes. Alright, they'll clean up Cratos, give him the ground, but what matters here is how much space they're getting.
They're getting so much space, but Cratos are allowing it right now, right? You've got this Genji blade that you're going to be coming in with. Rocket's got those superchargers. You are purely allowing them to get the space, and Frosted, you should not be putting that Sigma Flux in right there.
They already get a pick down on a hurry. There's no main healer for Cratos. I love this push, actually. Catches out 3 players with the Flux. The Ant Matrix is a bit of an overcommitment here, but you should be able to pick these players off. And all the meanwhile, this card's moving forward into final B fight territory. Where on earth are you going, Crory?
I'm gonna ring the bell of caution, though. That Sigma Flux is something that you needed to have when Maxwell comes in with this blade. We know how big this Genji can go with Dry Blades. We know how big he can go when Rocket's got those superchargers to help him out. And Skyfoxes, they'll have a Bob to try and root him away from the team, and that's going to be it.
Well, the Bob can be used aggressively. Oh my god, Skyfoxes do not stop. They keep moving forward. Well played. One with the blade, but still, Cratos are going to stop them in their tracks. With the spawn advantage, it should be enough for them to turn the fight in their favor.
Yeah, Gunpowder popping that rally, giving them just a little bit more sustain than the other side, and Skyfoxes will be forced back. This is the dangerous place. So this is the precarious spot. 1 minute 37 seconds. You've got to get yourself safely onto that payload, safely through the gauntlet that is going to be this high ground with default, with Maxwell residing in all of these perches, forcing your supports behind those shields, chipping away at Frosted and Faded, making sure that Atlas does not have the chance to set up what could be Skyfox's saving grace. This blade is the only thing that's going to be able to keep them on this cut, keep them moving through this map.
A minute on the clock, and here it is, Atlas's blade. You said it had to be big, but he's not connecting onto much of anything. The backseat's barely out of his reach. Will pick it up on the back end, though. In the meantime, Maxwell's doing it all without a blade. Dashes through too, but it's Skyfox is coming out on top just barely right now. No, Crory on the high ground, 1v2. Takes him down, and Atlas gets the final say, but for how long? The spawns are going to come in for Cratos.
He's got to just hold on to it, and even worse for this Genji to face is default and Maxwell coming into ultimate, but with 43 seconds, you were forced to abandon ship right now. You cannot be going down anytime before this contest starts, otherwise you will be lacking so much damage, especially with Aether going onto that Tracer. A lot harder to hit, but a lot lacking in the damage department.
Frosted has to hit big. He's got to lay down the laws of physics with this Gravitic Flux, or else for them it's the only big ultimate they have, and it only catches the opposing Sigma. Not that much value found, but Aether will manage to finish off default in the meantime. Now with a half HP team, Maxwell moves in, spots his opportunity, does catch out Autumn Souls, but now you're getting into extremely close quarters up against Skyfoxes, who are running the stats competition, who have the damage. Your team's falling apart behind you, and it's all green in the feed right now as Frosted and Faded finish off the fight for their team.
Skyfoxes, they were fighting in that side room, but 2 of their players were pushing the payload, and Cratos was so consumed with killing the members of Skyfoxes in front of them that they did not contest that cut and they allowed it to roll on through. But you've got 1 minute 15 seconds. We've talked about how hard it is to push this payload every fresh meter through C. The Skyfoxes will have to do it with less than 60 seconds available. They've got the ultimates, they've got amplification matrix, they've got the blade, but they've got the...
Be very careful. Look at how low Faded just went. Perfectly timed immortality from Fallen. But now that immortality is a tool they don't have up against the Bongo. All beautifully thrown in here by Rocket, catching everybody straight into the dynamite. I like the off angle though from Aether, allowing him to get damaged, but he can't get out. Misuses the coach gun, which makes him go down. This fight is turning into a complete cluster, but it's Cratos at the end of the day who are coming out on top.
Skyfox is holding on those supercharges, Genji Blade. They know what they've got to do, though. They know what they've got to get past, and it is not going to be an easy road for these guys because we've got 20 seconds left and Corey's holding on to the Sigma Flux. He knows the win condition that's available for Skyfoxes, and he is waiting with anticipation to shut it down.
Skyfoxes, I would love to see one more map of Overwatch, but you gotta clutch it out first. Everything used at the same time, and a lot of kills about to be in the feed. Maxwell, though, looking at the final say, Atlas finding one with the blade, looking for more. Autumn Soul's nearly up with the rally, which is gonna give them a ton of sustain heading into the final bit at this point.
They have to be so careful though. It's the overtime. Fallen's out of it. He has to go onto the Lucio. Faded too onto the Hammer to give the numbers advantage to Skyfoxes, but they've got to deal with Haruhi's amplification matrix without being able to disengage off the cart.
Oh, they've lost Autumn Souls just before the rally as well. The Bob can be online for Aether. That is the last hope that they have. Alice in the back line drops all the way down to 1 HP. It's getting so close, but it's Cratos all up in the kill feed, looking to take Blizzard World 2-0.
Oh, Cratos with the huge play. Skyfoxes was so close to making that comeback though. You could taste it. If that break had been there to rally, if that ultimate had come on through, they would have been cushioned, they would have been sustained, they would have been able to pull up to ultimates, but no! They fall at the final hurdle. 93% to your ultimate, and it's not enough to keep you through the amplification matrix. It's not enough to keep you through those Doomfist punches.
No, it was so damn close, Moxi. Think about it. If Skyfoxes do not give up those last couple meters, it's a completely different game. You look at Skyfoxes won. They would have won with the distance they have, but they lost one more fight on the defense, and that was enough for Cratos to take it.
And that tends to be the really sad tale of Blizzard World, right? You get to point C and you're either able to run it home so completely because you are up in the ultimate economy and you manage to keep staggering out the other side, or you lose because you can't push that cut one final last meter. And it's so hard because it's hard to get back onto the payload if you lose a single one of those fights, but it's even harder to get back onto that payload and keep it moving when it's right outside Defender spawn, when it's right there and Defenders have amplification matrix, have an ultimate that you have to bear the brunt of when it's in that overtime. You can't move out of the way. You can't wait 20 seconds until it's gone away. You just have to take the damage.
Yeah, a rough loss there for Skyfoxes right when they were getting back into it. Now that puts them 0-2 in the group. Meanwhile, Cratos, it's smooth sailing. These guys are feeling good. It's all Hakuna Matata for them, and they're going to be feeling real happy about their position in the group standings.
Yeah, they are currently tied with Malibu, I do believe, who are as well sitting at that 2-0 when it comes to win-loss ratio. So both of these guys have adapted really nicely to this new meta and are using that Genji for so much. And it's not just blades. He's no longer a blade, but he is the triple threat. And if you're a backline, he's absolutely terrifying right now.
Well, the games have been good so far, and they're going to continue to be good. Ladies and gentlemen, NA Contenders continues same time, same place tomorrow here on ELO Hell. You won't want to miss a bit of it. As for tonight, though, that's all that Moxi and I have. You want to find us, follow us wherever. If you want to follow the stream, go ahead and just subscribe to the ELO Hell YouTube channel, and you won't miss any more of this amazing action that we have going on. As for tonight, though, like I said, it's all we got. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you later.